Okay. Hello. This is Mrs. Visser having a bit of a bash at this whole technology thing. I'm going to be giving you a bit of a crash course on ancient Greek theatre as part of our introduction to pre-modern theatre, that is theatre that took place before the 1920s. So there's three theatre styles we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at ancient Greek theatre to begin with, then we'll be looking at Elizabethan theatre, so that's the theatre style where we are introduced to mainly the works of William Shakespeare, and then we're going to be looking at the Commedia dell'arte, which some of you would have already done either in Year 8 drama or Year 10 drama, and then we're going to finish off with naturalism. So without further ado, I'm going to talk a little bit about ancient Greek theatre. So with ancient Greek theatre, if you want to know how theatre started, it all started in Greece. So originally theatre was used as a religious observance, or as people used theatre to pay homage to a Greek god by the name of Dionysus. Dionysus was the god of festivity, of wine, of fertility, of harvest. Because in ancient Greece they didn't just believe in one god like Christians do, they believe in several gods, and you probably would know, you've heard of gods such as Zeus, Hera, and then you would have heard of demigods. That's gods that have people who are half god, half human. So, for example, Hercules, I think he was the son of Zeus, and his mother was human. So, yeah. So there's a lot of Greek mythology that has been stemmed from Greek culture. So theatre originally began as a religious ceremony to pay homage to this guy called Dionysus, and they used to sing songs and dance for Dionysus. Originally it was a performance that involved a group of people that were called a chorus, and this was and they were people who represented the community. Some of them were people who had a prestigious role in society, and they would sing songs, and they would sacrifice animals in order to appease the god. And over time, people started wanting to explore this whole idea of theatre a little bit more by looking at how they can use, so they actually had performances where they would have the chorus singing and dancing in unison on stage. So I'll show you a picture of an ancient Greek chorus. So it looked like this. They would all kind of sing and dance in unison. They often wore masks, and I'll talk a little bit about masks in a minute. They often sang and spoke in poetry. Often the course in time, the audience started to become a little bit bored with this whole idea of having a chorus on stage, and slowly from that evolved the use of individual actors as well as a chorus. So first of all, it started with one person on stage, one actor and a chorus, and then gradually over time you'd have more people as well as a chorus, and that's the formation of ancient Greek theatre. So you would probably, when you think of the word chorus, things that probably come to mind are like choruses that you hear in music theatre. So the role of the chorus is that, in music theatre, there are often people that linger in the background, that kind of comment on the action. They sort of fill in the gaps. Sometimes they act as they break the fourth wall by talking to the audience. That was pretty much what the role of the chorus was in ancient theatre. Ancient Greek theatre was that the chorus would comment on the action. They often represented the community. Often when there were corrupt characters on stage, the chorus would normally act as the conscience, or they would try and establish the moral ground, as opposed to the morally corrupt characters that would be on stage. So, for example, the play that I'm going to be talking about is the play Agamemnon. That's also one of the plays on the 2015 theatre studies playlist for the monologues. So yeah, so that was the role of the chorus. I think in our modern day society, we'd probably see the chorus as, if we watched an ancient Greek play, we'd probably find the chorus as a bit of an intrusion. You know, just to see a group of people hanging out in the background, it kind of makes you wonder, like, are they real people on stage, or are they meant to be symbolic? Yeah, but when they work together in harmony, it actually does look quite effective. So yeah, okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the staging. So in terms of how they staged performances in ancient Greek theatre, so this is how an how the stage would look like. This is what is called an amphitheatre. So it was an outdoor stage. It's almost got like a stadium kind of format. So it would have this kind of, you would probably hold up to about 50,000 people for a single performance. So, you know, around here, this is where you'd have your audience kind of seated. There was no sort of allocated seating. People could sit anywhere. My husband's just arrived. Hi.
Hi.
I'm doing actually a video. I'm recording myself for my students, so yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, so yeah, so that's where the audience would be seated. Around here is called the orchestra. So the orchestra is the stage. That's where the actors would perform. Around here, there would also be like an altar, again, just paying homage to Dionysus. These things called the parados, these were sort of like the side entries that the actors would come on stage. You'd have this thing, that's called the scene. That is where the actors would go behind backstage if they needed to change costume. So that's pretty much the set. Obviously, there was no technology there. They had no microphones, and I think the reason why they sort of designed this in such a way was the walls and were meant to try and echo out the actors' voices. So even though, you know, the actors would be sort of performing here, I think obviously the whole layout of the stage would be designed to help project the voices, which kind of leads me to stagecraft. So I'll talk a little bit about the masks. So the chorus would have to wear a mask. The actors didn't have to wear masks, but the chorus did, often to try and maybe help them try and, rather than individualise each other. I think the whole intention of the chorus was to try not to make themselves look like individuals. In fact, I think actually, yeah, the lead actors also had to wear masks. Sorry about that. But the intention of the masks was that the masks would often be made of cork or wood. And if you look at these really large mouthpieces, the mouthpieces were meant to try and project what they were trying to say, and the mouthpieces would sort of be shaped in a certain way to help project the actors' voices so that the audience could hear them clearly. The audience could occasionally be volatile at times. So, like if they weren't being entertained, they would, you know, it would pretty much be like being in a footy crowd. You know, they would boo and hiss and, you know, complain if they weren't being entertained. So, you know, it was very important for the actors to do everything they could in their power to try and entertain the audience. Yeah. So in terms of their costume, that often the actors just wore simple togas. The stagecraft was quite fairly minimal at the time. But in terms of some of the features, I'm just looking for a handout which talks a little. Okay, so that's kind of I've talked a little bit about the staging. I've talked a little bit about the history. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure, mainly of Greek tragedy, because the play script that we're going to be looking at as part of our focus for Greek tragedy is Agamemnon is actually a tragedy. So here are just some basic points on what often occurs in a Greek tragedy, and you might have already known this already. Often when violence and death was portrayed, it would always occur off stage. So in the play Agamemnon, the main character Agamemnon gets murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, and the violence actually takes place off stage, and the actor would sort of be shouting off stage as he's going through his final death throes. Also, frequent use of messengers are used to relate information. There's a continuous time of action, so what that means is that the play, there wouldn't be any time lapses. It would sort of start at the beginning and finish. It would be like a continuous sort of linear time that wouldn't sort of jump over days or decades or years. It would often have a single place or setting, so there'd be no scene changes. The stories would often be based on myths. So, you know, there'd probably be, they would talk about the myth of Hercules or other famous characters, and the focus is on psychological and ethical attributes of a character rather than physical or sociological. So what that means is that, you know, the stories would be very character driven. You know, they were designed to really help explore the inner motives and the motivations of the characters. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the structure of the play. So there again, that's the staging of what it looked like back in the ancient days. That's just a little bit more detail there. All of this information is on Moodle if you want to read in more detail. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the play Agamemnon. So this handout that I'm sort of scrolling down, this is taken from the Drama Victoria CD, and this is also on Moodle. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about the play Agamemnon. So if you haven't read the play already, and I do recommend that you do, because it is an interesting play, but it's obviously going to be challenging because it was written so many years ago, like Shakespeare. The story is about a soldier called Agamemnon who's just come home from the war. So you may have heard the story you may have known the story about the Trojan War, or maybe you may have seen the movie Troy that has Brad Pitt in it. But there was a war between the Trojans and the Greeks, and the Greeks won. So this takes place after Agamemnon and his army have won, have actually triumphed over Troy. Before Agamemnon leaves, he actually sacrificed his daughter as a way to appease the gods, and as a result of that, his wife, Clytemnestra, I'll see if I can try and pronounce this, Clytemnestra, whatever her name is, she's not happy at the idea because she's upset. And she's been kind of, as he's been away for so long, she's been stewing and plotting to get her revenge over the death of her daughter, and she sort of orchestrates this plot to have him murdered, and also in order to try and add more fuel to the fire, she's actually taken her cousin Aegisthus as her lover. Okay. Another thing that Agamemnon does when he comes home is that he actually brings with him a girl called Cassandra, who's an enslaved Trojan priestess of Apollo as his concubine. Concubine is a nice term to say mistress or lover, and this angers his wife even more. Okay. While this is all taking place, the chorus, which often is actually portrayed as old men in the original context, they're observing. They start off in the play talking about what happened in the Trojan War and how successfully Agamemnon won the war. Okay, and then and they're actually standing helpless as they watch Clytemnestra try and orchestrate this death, and they at one point they actually you know, argue with her and tell her what a horrible woman she is for, you know, doing such a horrible thing. Also, Cassandra, who is, as an interesting fact about Cassandra is that she has been cursed by Apollo with the gift of clairvoyance, or what clairvoyance means is for looking into the future. And she's been given this gift of clairvoyance, but she also has the curse that no one believes her prophecies. I'm just checking the time to see if I'm not... Okay, I'm rambling on here. So, you know, while she's... And unfortunately, Cassandra knows what is going to happen to her. She knows that she is going to die, and she discusses with the chorus about the fact that she's going to die, and of course the chorus are in denial about what will happen. And then as she is led into the palace with Agamemnon, unfortunately, as true to Cassandra's prophecy, Cassandra gets murdered, as well as Agamemnon, by Clytemnestra. And then at the end, Clytemnestra reveals the dead bodies of Agamemnon and Cassandra. Okay, and of course, as a result, the chorus are absolutely mortified, and they also get threatened by Clytemnestra's cousin as well. And it's also kind of been commented that it's the fact that they're standing there not doing anything and that they're helpless kind of adds a little bit of sort of comicness to the scene. I'll talk very quickly about Aeschylus, the playwright of Agamemnon. He was actually quoted as the father of tragedy. He was the first of 3 playwrights whose plays still exist. So there were many playwrights at the time, but there's only really 3 playwrights who's somehow managed to still have their plays still read to this day. So, and that's Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Apparently he worked at a vineyard, but he actually didn't want to be a writer at some stage, but it wasn't until Dionysus apparently visited him in his sleep and convinced him to write tragedies. He wrote his first play when he was 26 years old. 15 years later, he won his first prize in Athens in a playwriting competition, because they did have a lot of playwriting competitions back then that often started at sunrise and then would finish at sunset. He was not only a writer, but he was also a soldier. He actually fought in the war with his brother. That's his name there, whose name I'm not able to pronounce. But unfortunately, his brother died in battle, and that had a profound effect on Aeschylus. He died, and in fact, Aeschylus died in 458 BC, and apparently he died because a tortoise fell from the sky by an eagle and killed him. That's interesting. Another interesting thing about Aeschylus, only 7 out of his 70 to 90 plays survived. So, you know, you kind of think to yourself, wow, you know, how could he lose so many plays? But then when you think about the fact that he wrote all these plays in the BC era, you know, it's a miracle that at least, you know, 7 of his plays still exist today. Another interesting thing about his writing style is that when he first started writing theatre, theatre had just started evolving. That often had just a single actor and a chorus. It was actually Aeschylus who introduced the second actor in theatre, and apparently he introduced scene decoration and more dramatic costuming. In his plays, the chorus often forwarded the action. In fact, I think he was known for having the chorus featured more than any of the other choruses in the other 2 playwrights' plays. It's also interesting that in this play, Agamemnon, the chorus actually, they actually cover over half of the lines in the play, more than any of the other lead characters. So you can imagine just how important how much Aeschylus valued the role of the chorus in his plays. And just also very quickly on the context, so the play Agamemnon is actually part of a trilogy called the Oresteia. And I think what the trilogy is pretty much like, so it starts off with Agamemnon, the liberation bearers, and the Eumenides, and it actually finishes on a positive note, because I think basically it starts off with the death of Agamemnon and then it sort of follows on from there. Okay, and I think eventually sort of justice seems to be carried out for the death of Agamemnon. Yeah, so I think, so there's just a bit of a crash course on ancient Greek theatre. I hope you've enjoyed my video tutorial, even though it was quite clumsy, but please forgive me for that, because this is the first time I've done anything like this. But hopefully this just gives you a little bit more information about the role of ancient Greek theatre and how it made a profound effect in the world of theatre in many years to come. Okay, I'll talk to you later.